Hello, everyone. So, welcome back to the next session. So, we have a very special format of discussion, which is called Spotlight Session. So, this Spotlight session will be on how to apply expertise from big pharma to small biotech or medtech. And so, as we have very different delegates and participants from very different big pharma companies and also small companies. So I think this is a very, very valid discussion, and I'm very interested in what you have to say. So we have a panel which will be moderated by Natraj Dasgupta, who was the moderator in just the panel, which just was at the 9:30 session. So he will be again the moderator for this session, and we will have a presentation from Andreas Norlin. Andreas is project director and head of preclinical development at Ascelia Pharma in Sweden. So Andreas has more than 20 years in research, preclinical and clinical development from academia, biotech and big pharma. He has expertise in project management, people leadership, line management, and external collaborations. Previously, Andreas was project vice president with the overall responsibility for a portfolio of clinical stage development portfolio in a big pharma company, Novo Nordisk. And but now he works in Ascelia Pharma, which is a small enterprise. So, Andreas, good to see you and have you here again. So, please, would you like to try the screen share, Andreas, if it's working? Okay. So I guess I have to turn off the camera. So I'll let you continue. So
I guess you can see and hear me. I'm not planning to share any slides or so I will just tell my story. And hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here and thank all of you and the organizer to invite me to talk about myself here today. I have, as Mithun said, a mixed background. I've been working both in small and big companies, and I've been doing mostly project management. And I have had the reason to think quite a lot about this the past year since I started here at Ascelia Pharma. So Ascelia Pharma is a still very small company. We are around 20 employees, but we are in late stage. So we are running phase 3 projects and are planning to go to market within a couple of years with the first product that we have. And when I was hired a year ago, my role was primarily to run the projects as a project director, and at the same time also building the project management organization. And as I guess most of you know and can at least imagine, building the airplane while flying it can be challenging, but it's also super exciting. So therefore I'm very happy to talk about my experience here. And I guess there are plenty of topics you could bring up here, but I would like to start with actually from the beginning where I came into the company, and I first of all had to spend some time getting to know the projects and compiling the project plans that really didn't exist. It was very virtual, you could say, and that was the reason for I was hired, of course. They needed someone that could do this. But after a while, I also had to start to think about how are we actually doing this. And started to talk with my colleagues about what do you expect from a project management or portfolio management, if you like, in this small company. And having colleagues, I would say that most of my colleagues at that time had at least as long experience as I had from various companies. So we are roughly, or on average, 20 years in the industry from different areas. So I think it was quite amusing, actually, when we found out that we all said that, we are in a small company and there's a lot of opportunities, but we don't want to run this like big pharma. And we all agreed to that, and that became a mantra, I would say. We repeated that a lot. But that is not really helpful, because it's just saying what we don't want to do. It really doesn't say what we want to do. So that is my first learning here, that we have a lot of experience, both good and bad, from our previous jobs in big pharma, that we can bring to the table here. But we really need to sit down and be explicit about what it is that we need and what we want to do here. I think we tended to oversimplify this in the beginning and say, we don't want to be a big pharma company, so let's try to do this really super agile, if you like, and more or less just work on an ad hoc basis. And you can do that in a small team for a while. But over time, and I would say for the last half year or so, we have spent more time. We realized this doesn't really works very well. We need to do something better than this. And then we have had a very interesting process of finding out what it is that we need to do. And right now we have an agreement, and I think we are mutually seeing the need of establishing a very good decision-making process. And that is what we see as the key here to be successful. How do we actually make the decisions in the projects, and who is doing that, and who is the decision maker, who is recommending, and making that, creating some bureaucracy, you could say, but it should of course not be too much. But that is the experience we can bring from the big pharma. It's actually quite good to have some rules and processes for making decisions. So that's where we are right now. We are having more or less daily discussions about how we can refine this. But if someone would ask me today, what is the most important to think about when you are trying to apply your experiences from a bigger organization, when you are going to build a new organization in a smaller format, I think that is the key message, or the take-home message for me. You have to really be firm about how you make decisions. When you have that in place, many other things will come quite naturally, I would say. We have also been working on just what kind of project and portfolio management governance in general do we need, but it's very much linked to decision-making process. And of course, in a small company, we have the chance of being lean, agile, moving quick, but it should not be an excuse for us to make poor decisions because we didn't do our homework well enough. Because that's where I think we maybe hoped too much in the beginning, that we could just use our experience in a way and make good decisions. But also in a small organization, you need to do the homework. You need to have good information to make informed decisions. And that's what's most important. Also, looking back, I would say that, and it's probably linked to this, that the wish of making things very simple, I probably made a mistake that I didn't make a proper change management plan when we were going to implement new processes around the governance of and management of the projects. So if I had to do this again, I would spend more times early on to have these discussions. So as I said, you could talk about, or I could talk about this forever, and I could pick many other topics, but these are the most important in my mind, and at least they are on top of my mind right now. So therefore, I thought they were important and relevant to bring up here as an introduction. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Andreas. So, I think you mentioned building a plane while flying it, not for the weak-hearted. Um, and I think, bringing best practices from big pharma, change management, and other aspects of the transition are very, very, very critical,
Yeah.
especially in these kinds of roles, right? So, thank you. And I'd like to also introduce Susan and Wouter. Susan, welcome to the panel. Susan is the Chief Operating Officer of KLM Biosciences, leading chemistry and manufacturing controls and all non-clinical aspects, along with project and alliance management for KLM. So welcome, Susan. We also have Wouter. Wouter is the Vice President of Projects and Portfolio Management at Sangamo Therapeutics, a genomic medicine company conducting research and development across 4 distinct but complementary technology platforms: gene therapy, cell therapy, in vivo genome editing, and in vivo genome regulation. So welcome, Wouter, as well. So, as a segue to what, Andres mentioned, I would like to start with you, Susan. So what fundamental differences do you see in BPM between small and large companies? And secondly, what best practices or management ideas can be translated from small biotech or medtech to big pharma and vice versa?
Thank you, and such great questions, and always fun to think about. And I have to say, when you start to think about what do you need for a small company, the approach that I took when we were building KLM is that we need all the tools, the same tools that we use to manage our projects in large pharma, we need to apply, right? In fact, we also need to go to a deeper level of understanding, because in small companies, before being public, you are managing your budget, you're managing your cash flow. And so the need to really understand the cost of activities and what are on critical path and how they're interrelated are critical. But if I step back and say where we really needed to start was understanding our goals and what we needed to achieve. And I think that's the same with small companies as well as large. It was very important to decide how we were going to do our resourcing, what was going to be full-time FTEs versus contractors and consultants versus the use of vendors. What's key, though, that comes from big pharma and that we applied was making sure everyone felt part of one team and understood and aligned to the goals. In that way, we got the best outcomes from everyone. You wanted everyone there problem solving and owning the project together. So I think that's something to take from big pharma. You have to plan well. You have to do one difference would be the actual budget management as well and the flexibility there. We're very focused on identifying what were the milestones and managing on critical path to those milestones, and that's what we applied. From a portfolio level, it was still really important to do the basics of portfolio management. We need to prioritize the projects. We needed to prioritize and manage resource against those projects, because in small pharma, it is even more critical to deliver to your milestones that you've been communicating with your investors and with your board. So for me, it really is taking those best practices and making them fit for purpose. You don't need a system, but you need the tools to do it, and you need to apply them. I think you also were asking about skills and thinking about that aspect in small biotech relative to large. The competencies have to be the same. The challenge is you have to identify individuals who have multiple competencies to bring on board to help you solve your problems. And they have to be both strategic and operational at the same time. For people who are comfortable with risk and ambiguity, because our worlds tend to change a lot, both externally and as projects progress, there has to be that comfort, there has to be the expectation that you're going to roll up your sleeves and be a doer, and you need to enjoy it. You need to enjoy the fact that you built this company and you are really responsible for the success of the company. So I think that's something that people just need to think about when they're shaping the people that they bring into the small company. I think we tend to be a little more experienced so that we have that agile ability to learn new aspects of the business.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so there's sort of almost like an entrepreneurial aspect to this whole thing, because so things that we may take for granted in a large organization like Pfizer, Novo Nordisk, and so on, things we would assume that let's say a candidate would be naturally inclined to join, but then with a smaller organization you have to go the extra mile to make those things happen. So thank you. Wouter, could you please also share your thoughts on this fundamental differences in PPM between small and large, and what can be translated?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I completely agree with what was said before. I can particularly relate to what Andrea said about, having in your mind what you don't want to copy from the larger company. That's definitely in your mind, but it's very important to focus on what you do want to. One of the things that stand out seeing Susan, because we were both in Novartis at the same time for 3 years, and we may have just met once and talked once in that time. And that's what happens in a big company. Right, it's so big, and there's multiple sites. You were in Cambridge, I was at the West Coast, and we didn't rely as much on telecommunication as we do now, I guess. So that's something you immediately notice in a smaller company. Everybody is there. It's very easy to talk, and everybody. So that is an immediate difference. But then one of the things I did bring, and what was very strong in Novartis, was that the teams were very empowered, that culture. So that culture, but in a smaller company, I think people are across the smaller company very invested in certain projects. They know it so well, and then that can take away from the empowerment of the actual project teams. So one of the things that I wanted to introduce is the strong matrix organization, where you allow teams to really run with something. And so part of it is a cultural thing. Also, of course, what Susan said, the tools, the processes that you want to bring, and what Andreas was saying about decision making. So these are project management concepts that may not be as familiar in a smaller company, because it usually came from a real startup setting, although Sangamo was been around longer, but there's still that culture a little, and you kind of are brought in at some point to evolve the company to a larger company concept. So you have to then identify these mechanisms that worked pretty well up to that point, but then need to kind of evolve into these larger concepts, and that takes time, and you have to. So I can also relate to what Andrea was saying about change management plans, because sometimes the change just takes also quite a long time. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to make this change in the next 6 months and then will be different. It can take quite a while, but along the way you can start introducing more and more processes, but also concepts and philosophy. So at the same time, there's always this thought in your mind, like, I don't want to become very bureaucratic. I don't want to become this organization where people don't know each other. And so you try to kind of combine the best of both worlds, really, as idealistic as that may sound, because it's always challenging to find that fine balance. Yes. So, of course, I can talk about it also for a very long time, but I want to be cognizant of our time here.
Yeah. Thank you, Wouter. Yes, I think we are all sort of caught up with finite time as one of our challenges. So, one of the questions we have received is with regards to cultural acclimatization. So, for senior executives and project leaders, when they move from big pharma to small biotech or medtech, you need to sort of change, presumably, the way you've been working. And secondly, it's not just about running the projects. There are external factors such as investors, VCs, who take priority over maybe an internal project that might be very interesting to the organization, but something else takes precedence. So Andreas, it would be great if you can share your thoughts, followed by Susan and Wouter, please.
Yes. I think I actually would disagree a little bit for a starter. I don't think that it's a very big difference in that regard, but of course you are much closer to the stakeholders in the small organization. So you may actually meet up and speak or discuss directly with the board of directors that you will never do in a big company, of course. And in that way, it may be different. And another difference is, of course, that in the small organization with the limited resources, with a much smaller portfolio, you will probably don't succeed in doing the perfect portfolio management, and you will try to make your project survive for good and for bad. So I think that is. And what I mean is, in the larger organization, you have a broad portfolio because you are looking for the best project and that can survive and actually become something useful in the end. But in the small company, you may have only one or two projects, and you try to find new ways to bring them forward. Maybe find a new indication if it doesn't work in the first, So I think those are, in my mind, the biggest differences. But otherwise, it's not that different.
So that's interesting. Thank you, Andreas. Susan, your thoughts?
Sure. Building on what Andreas said, I think, the very interesting opportunity we have in small biotech is, yes, we're in there talking with the investors. We're in there talking to our boards. And so it's a very good dynamic, and people have to be very comfortable with that and thinking about what are the key issues and risks we have as a company, and what are external people going to be looking at and thinking about, and balancing that to the delivery, right? The delivery of your portfolio, your projects are key to the success. But there's also that outward and external perception that you have to work on, especially in a very small biotech scenario. So I think it comes back to that flexibility and comfort and the balance. I do think, again, that portfolio and that prioritization, as much as it's huge in big pharma, it's even more important. And part of that is the perception of the external environment. Knowing, we all are attuned to the competitive environment and what our competitors are doing, but in a small biotech, it's even more critical, and you don't always have like a built-out competitive intelligence department to do it for you. So it's the leadership and also with the employees to share what they're hearing at meetings and to be aware of things that could have an impact on the company. So.
Yep. Thank you, Wouter.
Yeah, I again agree with what's said before. I mean, you're much closer to what's happening with investors or within communications, and that can influence you. It's I would compare when I was at Novartis with maybe the big aircraft carrier that is really hard to change whatever you do, and if you're in a smaller company, it's much smaller ship that could change course with the wind. But it works both ways. Like Andrea said, you get influence, but you can also influence a lot more. So you have to make sure you maintain those channels, and you're aware of it, and that you use them. And so and it can actually be very interesting and enlightening and engaging to have that opportunity to be involved and to hear what's going on. And because that's the reality, especially for a biotech company, that you're not just in your department and you have a budget and you do what you want. You actually have to listen to, okay, we have a investor event coming up, and you have to, and we're gonna do something there. And so it's I actually enjoy that very much. But you have to make sure you engage with that, and and then it can actually work really well.
Yes, thank you for your perspective. And what I have also noticed, myself having also joined a smaller firm, sort of, a startup that we founded, having always worked in larger organizations like IBM, Swiss Bank, pharmaceutical companies, is that you're always apprehensive until you get into it, because whilst you're in a large organization, your world is very different than when you actually get into a smaller firm and don't know what to really expect. But it's an enriching experience, and you see how many things you have to do on your own, things that for which you have dedicated departments and resources in other firms. So it's a very enriching experience. So, well, we've come to the end of this talk, and I'd like to thank you all for your participation. I think it was a very insightful discussion, especially with all your experiences. And thank you to also the organizer for enabling our speakers to present at this panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nataraj. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Walter. Wonderful, wonderful session. And I can more than agree on what you said, because I also have made this transition. I was also once in a small company, as small as 7 people. And so I can completely understand how much things you have to improvise. And I learned so much about flexibility. And at the same time, I do like all the luxury in terms of processes and toolboxes that you can get in larger companies. And I think we can really move from one environment to another if we really stay in the mindset that we are trying to help and we're trying to support the team. So very helpful inputs from you. So thanks to the whole panel, and we will move to a break. So we have a break until 11. So feel free to use the networking option, and just chill and enjoy, meet other people from the community, and see you after the break.
Thank you.